emails direct. NSA free to bill@BillMartinezLive.com.
Welcome back, America. 14 minutes before the top of the hour. For more information on the show, you want to go to BillMartinezLive.com. Get involved in the conversation. Drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. Good, bad, indifferent. Bill@BillMartinezLive.com. Well, everything you thought about the Beltway, I wish I could put it in other words, but it's true. And it could possibly be worse than you even think. Lavish parties, committee chairmanships for sale, pay-to-play corruption, backroom arm twisting, votes on major legislation, going to the highest bidder. This is what Congressman Ken Buck is blowing the whistle on. The real-life house of cards that our nation's capital, in his oncoming book, his book that is now released, I should say, Drain the Swamp, How Washington Corruption is Worse Than You Think. Congressman Buck, thank you for being with us on Bill Martinez Live.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Congressman, as I said, you're my new hero. Anybody who's willing to come to the forefront out of the shadows, not since Tom Coburn have we had somebody with your kind of courage. You entered Congress, elected in 2014, one of the largest Republican freshman classes ever, and you were quickly met with reality. And the reality is that not only were the people being misrepresented, but we needed help quickly.
That's absolutely right. It was an eye-opener when I got there. Even though I knew things weren't working well, it was still an eye-opener to learn the specifics.
Mm-hmm. Give our audience so they understand, your background. So what you were bringing to D.C. in terms of your experience.
I was a prosecutor. I got out of law school. Actually went to work for Congressman Dick Cheney on the Iran-Contra investigation, and then went to the Department of Justice and was a prosecutor in D.C. and in Denver, Colorado. Became the chief of the criminal division after a few years in Denver. Left and ran for district attorney in northern Colorado, and I was served as district attorney for 10 years before I ran and won the congressional seat.
Congressman Buck, what motivated you to, get on the playing field of national politics?
Well, I really, as I looked at the situation in this country, I don't think we have that many more years before we go off the fiscal cliff. And my number one issue is spending and debt. And I just feel very strongly that we need to get people back there that will make the hard decisions so that we can avoid the effects of this $20 trillion of debt and growing.
Well, in your book, Drain the Swamp, How Washington Corruption is Worse Than You Think, you didn't hold anything back. There isn't any sacred cows here. You name names.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that the American people understand exactly what is going on in D.C. and then the solutions that I propose, because it's not going to be solved by a group of people that go back to D.C. and get very comfortable. It's going to be solved by Americans demanding solutions and working on those solutions.
Well, it's supposed to be a government of, for, by, we the people. We keep saying on this show, Congressman, and the people have subordinated their power and authority, and this is why the elites have been running amok for all these decades, and there's no question. It's kind of like finding yourself obese one day. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process, and it's going to take a process again to get us back on track, isn't it?
It is, and I would say that the federal government is morbidly obese at this point, and it's really going to take more than just diet and exercise. It's going to take some very hard work by a lot of people.
Are you encouraged to the fact that we have a businessman in the Oval Office? This is something I've been calling for a long time, is that we needed some business acumen brought into the Oval Office. You can question, everybody looks for perfect and that, but I don't want to argue perfection, but I want to argue at least an idea of understanding some pragmatic principles that need to be applied to our government. And I see where people are starting to run a little bit scared because it's not business as usual on the Beltway.
Yeah, I think this having an outsider come into D.C. is a real benefit for Washington, D.C. And I think that Donald Trump has done a great job for conservatives with his Supreme Court pick, Neil Gorsuch. Mm-hmm. I think that Justice Gorsuch is going to be great for America. I think that we're very fortunate with the cabinet that President Trump picked. I think he's issued a number of great executive orders. Draining the swamp is a little bit different, and it's going to take more time and more perseverance on his part, and we'll just see down the road how well that gets done.
Well, as we progress, and I use that word in the traditional sense, toward draining the swamp, with each step toward that end, then more people will be encouraged. This will increase the level of courage that's necessary to do this, because like you say, these reindeer games that are played on the Beltway have been well established. If you're not invited to the right cocktail parties, you don't know the secret handshake, I say the Dakota ring and all that stuff that goes along with it, you can be the odd man out, and you're putting yourself at risk here by doing just that and calling out people, putting it on the line, letting the constituency, we the people, know what is happening, what's happening behind those dark doors in D.C.
Yeah, I think it's just essential to make sure people understand what's going on, so they understand the necessity for working on the solutions.
Mm-hmm. Well, some people want to point to Democrats or Republicans as being the problem. I say we need to point to the man in the mirror. I mean, this is a government of and for by we the people, which means that we're responsible. What's happening? We can't blame Congress for these problems. I mean, we've kind of let them run amok without accountability, haven't we?
Yes and no. I think we can blame Congress. We should blame Congress, and we should do something about it. And we should really, I devote a chapter in the book to the crisis in character that we have. Too often in Congress, we spend a lot of time figuring out how to avoid taking the tough votes rather than how to solve the problem. And if we sent people to Congress that wanted to take the tough votes and understood the ramifications, they may not last 30 years. They may not last 10 years. But the country is going to be better off for it. I think that's really important. But you're absolutely right. It starts with each individual voter taking responsibility for who they send to represent them in Washington.
Exactly. Well, Congressman, I mean, you've been there now, you're going on your third year, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you first get in there, your eyes are wide open, you're kind of shocked at what's going on. When did you hit the tipping point on this and you said, I have got to write a book?
It was pretty early on. During orientation, it was amazing to me, the receptions at parties and sort of the whining and dining that went on. And then I realized after I was sworn in, that there's really two paths to take in Washington, and it's made very clear to congressmen very early on. You can play the game and get along and live a very comfortable life, or you can vote your conscience, vote for America's long-term interests, and there will be consequences. And when I saw that, I realized I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to get along here. And I'm not going to be working towards a chairmanship or a leadership position. I'm going to have to go this other route. And part of that other route for me was writing a book and making sure that people understood that if we don't act in the grassroots America, we are not going to change the system.
Did it bother you when you started realizing the amount of, let's say, plus money that, and I don't want to say necessarily that is earned, but the money that goes to congressmen and senators to where they come in at a certain level of net worth and leave with a multiple number of net worth? Did you start to see that?
I certainly read the stories about Harry Reid, and he lived on, whatever it is, $190,000. I'm not sure what a senator makes, but it's in that ballpark, mm-hmm. and lives in a penthouse in the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C. It was outrageous rent when I looked for a 500 square foot little apartment, and trying to figure out how someone can live in a penthouse. So certainly there are members of Congress who have lined their own pockets with insider trading deals and in other ways, but the other side of that coin, there are more than 100 members of the United States House who live in their offices because they have kids going to college and they're trying to save money, and Speaker John Boehner is one of those. And so it really is a number of people who refuse to go that way and are on the other side, struggling to make ends meet on the salary and maintaining a home in the district and a home in D.C.
Well, Congressman, again, we thank you for the time. Appreciate you coming on the show to talk about your book, Drain the Swamp, How Washington Corruption is Worse Than You Think. Congressman Ken Buck is with us. One final question, sir. What can readers do, the readers of your book, do to help drain the swamp and join forces with you?
Well, one of the things I think is really important is to understand the problem, and I sort of do my best to outline the problem in the first 10 chapters, 11 chapters of the book. Then I talk about things that people should be talking to their congressmen about. We should not have a pay-to-play system for committee chairmanship and committee assignments, and so we should make that unethical. We should have a constitutional convention of the states to amend our constitution and have term limits and a balanced budget amendment. So there are very specific goals in the last couple of chapters and strategies for how to make this a better country and avoid the downside that we're facing.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate the book and the vision, and we wish you all the best. Congressman Ken Buck, Republican from Windsor, representing Colorado's 4th Congressional District. He was first elected to Congress November the 4th, 2014, currently serving his second term in the U.S. House of Representatives. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Committee on Rules. Thank you so much, Congressman. Appreciate the time.